Take two, let's go.
Okay, that's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Don't worry about us.
Well, I'm Becky Monroe, and again, I'm with the California Civil Rights Department. And what I was going to say is a particular honor to be here because I have, we've been doing this work with California versus Hate. We had this sort of official launch in May of this year. What I want to say is, though, Marin County has long been at the sort of forefront of addressing hate. So I see the leaders of Marin, who've done a lot of work and helped to create legislation. Your district attorney was one of the first people who reached out to me affirmatively, which is always a great sign when people are trying to be proactive to address hate. And I've had the chance to work with Nancy as well. So I'm really grateful to be in a community that's as active as this one is in terms of thinking about how to combat hate. I'm gonna I feel like the actual disclaimer here is I am a lawyer. So if I ever fall into acronyms that I shouldn't be, you can call me on it. And one of the things I always want to emphasize when I talk about our work is that the Civil Rights Department, we are California Civil Rights Agency. We do civil rights enforcement, meaning employment discrimination, housing discrimination. If people are discriminated in what's called public accommodations, which is basically when you go into businesses. And we also protect people with civility from hate, violence, and human trafficking. What that means is, the district attorney may have criminal jurisdiction, we have civil jurisdiction. And we think it's important because one of the things we recognize is that hate does not happen in a vacuum. It is more likely to happen where there is an effective enforcement of civil rights across the board. So I think that it is very relevant to think about how are we enforcing employment discrimination, for example, and helping to make sure that people are not discriminated against at work if we're thinking about how to create a climate that doesn't encourage hate crimes. I'm going to I have three main sections. My first one, again, is just really thinking about this comprehensive approach. These are all of the statutes that we enforce at the Civil Rights Department. And again, some of them you may not at first blush think, well, what does this have to do with sort of preventing or enforcing hate crimes? And I think one of the reasons that the Civil Rights Department was selected as the home for California versus Hate was a recognition of just what I was talking about. The fact that we have to think about how do we address civil rights across the board if we're truly going to get the root of what's causing hate incidents and hate crimes. So what we're here to talk about today, and I am grateful again, Marin has been very active in helping us to sort of think about how we can improve this work, is the California versus Hate Resource Line Network. Our main message that we want to get across is there is support when you report, meaning we are not only asking people to report, we're actually asking people to report so that we can help get them meaningful resources and support. So the California versus Hate Resource Line and Network, we have sort of three main goals, and then the fourth piece is how we try to achieve those goals. The first is, if someone reaches out, we want people to know what their options are if they're targeted. Some people may call and they want to go to law enforcement. They want to know what that will happen if they do that. There's a lot of fear sometimes connected to reporting to law enforcement, so we can help explain that. Other people know they don't feel safe with law enforcement. There are a lot, for the communities that are targeted for hate, there is a very strong overlap with communities that don't trust the police. And so we want to make sure we're meeting people where they are. So sometimes they want to know their options. What happens if I go to law enforcement? We will help explain what that process may look like. Sometimes they've already had engagement with law enforcement. And we've had a few cases recently where we just help people follow up. They couldn't get to the detective that they thought was in charge, and they couldn't get the information they wanted, so we help them with those sorts of updates. Other folks say, no law enforcement, but I need to know, are there any other options for me? Maybe not through the police, but other civil legal options. So one of the things we let people know is, yes, you may be able to sort of bring a civil claim. We have something called the Ralph Act in California, which allows people to bring civil claims. I keep using this term, I wanted to define it. A civil claim means that it's not the government who's bringing the case, it can be an individual, and you are generally, in this case, you can get damages, so money damages, or something called injunctive relief, which may mean in the form, for example, of a restraining order. So we want people to know you've got choices. Or if you don't want to go through the legal system at all, but you want to connect with culturally competent resources and support. So that's another thing that we often we spend a lot of time talking about and a lot of time building out our network. So we have In addition to, California having California versus hate, we have the California Department of Social Services is giving out grants to individual nonprofits across the state. They have now, their latest round were about 180 community-based organizations. That means all of those groups are in our network. So if someone needs, for example, mental health services and they need it in Mandarin, we are able to connect them with resources that would be in Mandarin. If someone would like to have social services or support from an organization, perhaps they want it in English, but they want it from someone who has the same lived experience of discrimination, we are more likely to be able to do that. So we can connect with resources that are not only in language, but also recognize that people's experience of discrimination may differ. We also, one of our goals is just improve hate incident and hate crime reporting data. So Marin County collects incident data, which is fabulous. It's not true across our state yet. There's a few reasons we think it's important. When we think about if you are a victim of a crime or an incident, you ought not be required to be a legal expert to know differences. You ought to just know if you've been targeted for hate or discrimination, you have a place to go to get help. So we don't want to sort of artificially put up a barrier, because sometimes people, I was working, we work a lot with the NAACP, both the state conference and individual branch. The number of times I've heard people say, you want me to report hate? We'll talk about this. It happens to me every day of my life. Why would I report that? Why would that be? No one's going to do anything. So part of what we want people to feel is if they report, we will get them meaningful support, because we want to recognize that you shouldn't have to be an expert to know what happened, whether it's a violation of a civil rights law that's civil or criminal. We just want you to get support. The other thing that we know is, even though we have I think among the states in the nation, California has one of the strongest in terms of our state attorney general reporting hate crime data. And that's crimes that are reported to law enforcement. We don't currently report incidents at the state level. We think that is important. One, because if you know if an incident is occurring, it can often help to understand what the climate is, so you can sort of better understand whether or not hate crimes there may be a trend. But I've also talked, one of the things that's really, I think, interesting is if you look at law enforcement agencies across the country, including like the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So I work on their Human and Civil Rights Committee. IACP, for a long time, our model policy has said that the best standard for law enforcement is to collect incident and crime data. And again, that's to encourage people to report, make sure they feel safe doing so. But it's also because I think there's a recognition that sometimes, I was just presenting at a conference with the police chiefs from across the country, and we had a deputy from LA County Sheriff's Department speaking about how she has used hate incident data to support a prosecution in a hate crime, because it showed a pattern. So I think there's technical reasons. There's also just, we want people to feel safe reporting. The thing we don't want to happen is for someone to call and say this happened, and then the police department to say, sorry, not a crime, there's nothing we can do. Now we don't have to do that. They can say, that may not be a crime, but it's important to us that you report that. We're going to capture this, and here's a resource that can actually provide you with meaning. So in order to accomplish all of that, we have ongoing training, both on cultural competence, and we are also, and all the people who talk to anyone who may be targeted for hate, it's gone through a lot of trauma-informed training, but we're also always expanding our network to make sure that we can connect people with culturally specific organizations where possible. And just to give you kind of a sense of how we do this, you can go online. In California versus Hate, the forum is currently available in 15 languages. If people call, it's now actually up to 240 languages that we can serve people in through 8338 No Hate. And again, our 211 statewide network of trauma-informed agents. And we also have people who are kind of able to serve as care coordinators, meaning you call, and we were just talking about this. Say you call, you want to report, but you need some help in identifying legal services. Instead of just saying, here's 5 potential options, good luck, we say, here's 5 options. You want me to get on the phone with you? Can we call, but we set up a time where we can talk and we will try and find them with you, so you actually connect with the help that you're looking for. So that's one of the things we try to do, that we kind of stay on with the person. We want to stay connected. We do not terminate that relationship unless the person doesn't want to be talking to us. Of course, if some people do just want to report, and that's fine. But if they want additional further follow-up, we will provide it. Again, this is sort of the process. Your initial call is going to be shorter, and then there will be a follow-up, longer call where we can make sure you're connecting with what you need. And I'm just going to point out, we are proud of a lot of our graphics. We think they're kind of they're more interesting than we usually come up with from the state. Not to throw shade on the state, but sometimes we're not great at graphics. Some of the materials you'll see here, especially because there's somebody who works with younger people, we do have, and I'm going to talk a little bit how to access this, but we had a whole back to school series of materials that we put out so that people know how to reach this, how to understand this information as well. So accountability. We want to let people know, you've got all of these options, but whenever possible, we're connecting with culturally competent resources and support, and we hear from those groups when we're not doing it well, and that's what we do. So we have had, we responded to sort of a lot of individual incidents. We also have responded to some bigger incidents that have been more high profile. And one of the things we want to know is, what if it didn't do right, what can we do better? Really, also, it's something we always emphasize. If we made a mistake that caused harm, how do we repair that harm? So we are pretty serious about this, because we cannot do this effectively if we don't earn trust. One of the things that's important in terms of trust is recognizing that some people may feel they don't want to share information about their name, they want to have more confidential information, they can do that. It's really up to the person reporting how much they share. Whether or not someone reports anonymously, we will not disclose to anyone without their permission. And the only exceptions are these here. If a report is made of child abuse, elder abuse, or dependent adult abuse, or activities indicating an imminent risk of violence. And I go through that because I want to be clear, we take this very seriously. We thought through all of the options to make sure we can make this as private and confidential as possible. We also do have some contracts with community-based organizations. We have regular community feedback sessions. We have a multilingual outreach and education campaign. So some of the materials you'll see here, we've also been doing a lot of work with ethnic media outlets across our state. California State Library, which folks don't always think about, how are they connected to combating hate? They have a great grant program that's specifically focused on reaching ethnic media outlets to combat hate. So we work a lot with those ethnic media outlets. We also are investing a lot in making sure we're buying ads and making sure that we're reaching folks through those outlets. And I will say, for folks, we're really fortunate. We learned a lot from our colleagues in Los Angeles who had LA versus hate. One of the things that's a little bit different is it's 211 in LA, or you can call our number statewide. Our number, we did a different number than the 211 to make sure we had a short wait time. We want to hear if this is not happening, but by contract, people should be waiting no more than 3 minutes if we call 838. So this is the content hub that I was describing a little bit before. We recognize that we could be the best state agency ever, and that some people will not trust us because we're the government, and that's fair. But we have a long way to go to earn that trust. So some of what we do is really targeted to community-based organizations. So we will serve. So say someone is targeted for hate, they're not going to come to us, and they'll go to their synagogue or their mosque, or they'll go to an LGBT center. We will serve that center. So if some people may never want to come into contact with me, and that's okay. If they want to come in contact with someone they trust, we can get the resources through that entity that they trust. One of the ways we try to do that is we have a content hub for partners. If you go on our website, you'll see this partnership hub. Some of it is just social graphics where people can get information out, posters and flyers, and then we also have customizable content. We give it a shot here to show you what it could look like. We can do it for community-based organizations. So we've been working with some CBOs that have asked in For example, one in Spanish and a particular with their logo on it with ours, so they could get the word out about how to get information. That's one of the ways we're trying to do that. I also just wanted to make sure you know, at the Civil Rights Department, we are home to the Commission on the State of Hate. So the California Commission on the State of Hate it includes 9 members with appointees from the governor, Speaker of the Assembly, and the Senate Committee on Rules. The commission has multiple obligations. One is to develop an accounting of hate activity. One is to host community forums. We just had one last week with young people in the state talking about their experience of hate. And then also to provide resources and guidance to communities and make policy recommendations there. What I will say is it's been such a nice thing to be they are staffed by folks in our department. We can work together. So we can share information about where we see gaps, where do we see needs that we're seeing when we're talking to victims. Then they can bring in really rigorous research that they have the ability to do through the commission as well. And then this, I will just say, is very close to my heart because I spent 8 years during the Obama administration working in 2 main places, 3 I guess. The Community Relations Service, which is, it was created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the whole idea was that we cannot address civil rights in this country if we do not bring communities to the table. So the Community Conflict Resolution team, they do civil rights mediation. They are often, when I was at the US DOJ, we would often be there in the aftermath of a hate crime, or sometimes have an officer involved shooting, where there was a lot of tension in communities, and making sure, one, that people were able to if they were protesting, that we could do it in a way that people didn't get hurt. But secondly, to really help to address underlying issues that may be driving discrimination, may be driving that tension. So we have that team here now. We have funding so that we can actually go out and help Californians through this work as well. And some of this is, again, community mediation. Some of it is training on how to sort of help communities to de-escalate, to bring down tension. But we're proud of this tool because we think it's an important one that recognizes there may be some areas where the law is not the answer, or what we need are to sort of help to facilitate conversations that will allow communities to help to de-escalate. I lost my, let's see, do you mind going to the next one? Thank you. There you go. That's it. The next slides, I'm happy to post them if you can do that, because the next slides have some technical things like the definition of a hate crime and a hate incident. We get a lot of questions about, just to help people know kind of how to access that. So I'm happy to answer questions again. It's just, I'm really grateful to you for inviting us, and I have been doing this work for about 20 years, and it's just when the community is affirmative and trying to do this work, it's a really good sign. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Let's give it up for Becky. All right. Thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and take down the show, and we want to see faces if we can. So we invite our friends on Zoom to come on off. Come on and show your video if you're able to. We would love to see if we could. But we want to go ahead and move into some Q&A with Becky.
Great.
And so I have a couple of questions for you, Becky, and then we want to open it up to our team here. We're both in the room and then we're also online. So Becky, this work is really innovative, and I just want to commend you and your team for all that you've done to get to where you are. I was reading that there's been, such a spike in hate crimes since back to 2001 levels. We had a number of hate crimes against particularly Black and Asian American citizens, as well as the coronavirus pandemic and the racial justice movement of 2020. And so we've seen this real spike in hate crimes. And I think we're seeing more now as we have what's going on in the Middle East as well, right? And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what are the ways in which you're supporting people, and you touched on this, but supporting people beyond just making a complaint, acknowledging that a hate crime took place. But I love the fact that you talked about this healing center, trauma-informed approach. And so you mentioned care coordinator in some of the language that you shared. What else are you all doing to support people beyond just being able to make that complaint or hate incident?
And it's a really important question in part because, as I think your question so helpfully highlights, hate is not new. We are not, I mean, I think we are definitely seeing people, I think we saw with previous, we have had national leaders who have in the past emboldened people in acts of hate. So that is definitely something that we know, but we know hate is not new. So what does that mean in terms of how do we actually support people now? The first thing we have to recognize is we are talking about reaching out to people or responding to people. They are in trauma and they have been through something that requires that we really provide them with support. So how do we actually support people? Part of it is if you call, some of it, sometimes people are at different stages. We've had some people call and say, yes, I want a lawyer, I want to bring a lawsuit now, and we can connect them with legal services. So that's something real we can do. In terms of mental health care, different people think of mental health care in different ways, and different communities are comfortable with different kinds of mental health care. So part of our obligation is to sort of be with people as they kind of navigate what their options are. So we will say, here's some choices, here's some places you might be able to go. And they may say, I'm not comfortable with that, but I am more comfortable with this. So I'm not comfortable talking to a therapist, but I would like to talk to other people who are in my community that may have experienced discrimination or may have that same lived experience, and I want to work with them so we can connect them there. One of the other things we are incredibly fortunate, one of my colleagues, Chantel Bermudez, who is one of the senior managers of California versus Hate, Chantel used to be at the California Victim Compensation Board. She spent about 20 years there, which means she can help people navigate that system as well. So sometimes we'll work with people who did connect. They have, they've been a victim of a crime, and they're having a hard time navigating that, and so we can help them with those resources as well, which is a very sort of practical, maybe not a very exciting thing to talk about generally, but really can help people connect with those resources. Another thing that we've been trying to do, and we do this in conjunction with the Community Conflict Resolution Unit, is when there is a high-profile act of hate, or like a mass, there's multiple victims, we know that there's going to be a lot of trauma. So in recent, I think what I'm thinking about right now is in Monterey Park after the shooting. You may recall in the immediate aftermath of that shooting, people didn't know what was happening. They didn't know what, they were scared. And again, this was the Asian American community was the primary victims in that shooting, and they were seeing an increase in hate. So there was a lot of fear. So part of what we did was we recognized that regardless of what the investigation found, this was a community that was in fear and had been subject to discrimination in the past, and was worried about accessing resources. So in that case, what we did was we really worked with local community-based organizations, and we just tried to be a good representative of our state, meaning, what do you need? You need to talk to California Victim Compensation, we'll get them on board. Oh, you have a question for the FTD, taxes come up in these kind of situations where people are trying to recover. Oh, we'll bring them in. What question do you need? So part of it is also coordinating and recognizing our role in helping people to access the resources that are available and sort of demystifying that process. So it can look a lot of different ways, but to your point, we are beyond people being able to, it is not acceptable for us just to say, yes, report, and we'll take it down. We have an obligation to do more, and people are not going to report it because we haven't earned enough trust that way. So those are some of the things we're doing. We're always looking at sort of expanding what those resources look like. One of the awesome things about working with community-based organizations is they have so many ideas about what things we're doing. So we will bring in those ideas as well to make sure that we're both responding to immediate needs and recognizing that people are going to be able to.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate that thoughtful response. And the other question that came up for me in your presentation was around, a lot of times in the Office of Equity with our team, we talk about the root causes of inequity. What are the root causes of these systemic inequities? And you touched on that in your presentation. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what your team is doing to address those root causes. And you touched on engagement and facilitation, conflict resolution, and some of the things that have come up here in Marin County are people saying, hey, we want to have some candid conversations about race. We want to have some candid conversations about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in in Israel, you know, and so I just wonder if you could speak to what you see as the value and efficacy of having those conversations and what your team is doing to facilitate that.
I think, you know, there are a few different things, but I'm really glad you put up on that piece because it's something I think that's very important. I think we owe it to people who are reaching out to respond to their needs. Absolutely. We also need to recognize, as I mentioned, it is not new, and if we're truly going to address it, we cannot move forward if we don't face the truth, which means we cannot move forward if we don't face sort of ongoing forms of discrimination that may be leading to today. I think, you know, I think one of the things we have to talk about is, and I mentioned this earlier today when we launched United Against Hate Week in Berkeley, was there are multiple sort of efforts to divide our communities, and I think we have to acknowledge that white supremacy is at its strongest when it divides us. That is part of the power of white supremacy. So I think we do think a lot about sort of how do we help people both meet their immediate needs and get to the underlying issues. So to your question about how to have those conversations, one of the first things that is important to note is that we have to, you have those conversations, you cannot force them, you cannot force the timing. Sometimes, and I think right now we're seeing a lot of communities that are just so raw and in so much pain. The first thing we have to do is teach and remind each other how to support each other. So maybe we're not yet at that, you know, maybe we're not yet at that point where we're having those conversations, but we're talking to people of all ages about how do you reach out and at least offer something meaningful to somebody who's, that is the first step. And then I think the other piece about sort of helping people come around to a table to talk about these underlying issues, I think you give people the space, you make sure they're in a place where they're able to do that. And then what often helps is to sort of identify underlying, we may have a lot of different positions, but we do have underlying interests that are the same. I will give you a completely different example. When I was working with the federal government, we would often be brought in, for example, after an officer in law shooting. And it would be very hard to think about how do you bring civil rights organizations, and they represent people in the community who have lost someone in an officer in law shooting, law enforcement. And ultimately, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of pre-work. Like, you know, people are like, yes, let's have a difficult conversation. We'll reserve the room and go for it. And no, you don't want to do that. You spend a lot of time separately helping people think through, you know, what are your interests? What are your goals? What's driving this? What would make you feel, you know, what does safety look like to you? And being really honest about sort of recognizing that. People talking to law enforcement, bringing people together. So part of that, in that process, we would really spend a lot of time helping people understand kind of where they were initially, and then looking at what those common underlying genuine interests were that they shared. And it also takes time. So we've had these kind of community civil rights mediations. You know, you have the individual meetings, you bring people together. The first meeting is really tough. People aren't willing to talk. And you have to just kind of keep at it. And as a state agency, one of the things we have to do is to be prepared for people to be very angry at us. And that is part of my job. I always tell people it's not the most fun thing to be, but it is something we have to do. It is our obligation to go into difficult conversations like that, have people sort of express understandable frustration and anger at us, listen to them, figure out what can we do that meaningfully addresses that, and then think about how we can actually get people to talk about getting to the table. So I wish I could tell you, oh, we've got a 5-step process, it's easy, we can do it. But I think the first thing is, it helps to recognize our common humanity. One of the things that I found time and time again is people who've been targeted for the worst thing that's ever happened to them still want to help other people. And so if we can tap into that, think about how we can support each other right now, and maybe we get to the point where we can come to the table and talk about what can we do constructively to help build more bridges to address it.
Thank you for that, Becky. I so much of this is resonating with me, but I want to share the mic. And so I see we got some hands here. Let's go with Sam, Samantha. And let's give us 1 sec, Sam. Make sure we can hear you. Give us 1 sec.
Hi.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, can you hear me?
Go for it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about a local incident that happened a few weeks ago that went a little viral, where some students were caught saying the N-word at that go to TAM. And so I'm wondering what is the relationship between the county and the community when these incidents of hate happen, and if there's anything that the county does, even though it technically falls under the jurisdiction of the school board and the school administrators.
Great question, Sam, and I know we had some real aficionados in the room here, so I'll take a first pass at it, and I want to invite my colleagues to chime in as well. So yes, Sam, I'm very familiar with that incident, and you know, part of what we've done is act as a resource. As you noted, that it was something that fell under the purview of the County Office of Education, and so that's really their area of influence. However, we wanted to be a partner, we wanted to be a resource where we could. And so we shared information, we shared strategies, for example. And so we hope that it made it up the chain to the folks who were making some of the final decisions. But that was really the main way that we sought to be a partner through that particular incident. And so should folks have issues and they reach out to us, we certainly are very quick to respond in a mutually reciprocal way. And so that's the way that I know that we've done some work, but I want to invite my colleague Lori in particular. Lori, do you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I would have to say, unfortunately, my office was not involved in that situation, but I'm well aware of it, we're watching it. We are one of the few prosecutors' offices in the state that have, a hate crime investigator, and he would have been the perfect person to respond there because he coaches some of the basketball teams. But he is out on leave right now. We hope he'll be back the year, but he's been in the schools talking to kids, and he's one of those people that when he walks in, he almost has instant trust because he used to be a professional player for the Warriors, and he just has one of those personalities, and he's also suffered lots of hate and racism acts, and so he is kind of our trusted messenger, but he unfortunately is not available for that. We do also have a sort of justice partner if we are asked. We've had her work with some local situations, not necessarily hate, but we've been trying to really lift that kind of work in our community. And actually, I am so grateful, to dovetail a little bit, I'm so grateful that the state is offering this all these resources for people, because we really made a heroic effort in one of our cities to try and have a response team like that. And it was a really difficult lift for a variety of reasons. So I'm really grateful that the state at least offers this to people who are going through this, because and maybe it'll be more successful because it is more trusted, more trusted. So, but I think it is key that people who suffered it are really great allies to use, and we have two of them in the room here that Mr. Levine actually helped author that hate crime legislation that was passed. So, and that came out of a horrible incident in our county. So good things can come from horrible things, and you know, I know the youth at that school are really making sure their voices are heard. So I think that's important. I think some good change will come from it, but that doesn't stop being what it was. I think that's the healing part that still has to happen.
Becky, you and I were having conversations prior to this starting, and we were actually talking. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle with the Office of Ed. We're talking about a little bit the process through an OCR complaint and what it entails to uplift the voices of youth of color who are in situations in which jurisdictions perhaps either know or sometimes are not aware, but sometimes they are aware, and then they need to take it to the next level as well. But I know that's not your purview now, but you do have some experience, and would you be able to talk about that process a little bit?
Sure, and again, I, as a caveat, now I work for the state, so the Civil Rights Department doesn't have jurisdiction over those claims, but what I can tell you is there's a couple of ways that students can file complaints. So one is through their local education agency. So if they suffered after discrimination, they, you know, often their parents can file a claim with a local education agency, and it goes through that process. There is another process that students can use, and that's through the federal government, the Department of Justice, or the Federal Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, or OCR. They have regional offices, and so people can file claims directly through there as well. One thing that I can say is if you're trying to figure out how to do this, I mean, one of the things that's, again, that's really hard about this is if you're, I mean, I'm, you know, a lot of parents in the room, I'm a parent, something like, you know, if your kid has been targeted for an act of discrimination, it is very hard to sit down and think, okay, what paperwork do I fill out to make sure that I can. So one of the things people can do is they can reach out to our hotline, and we can at least help you kind of figure out and navigate, well, here's your choices. If you go to the local education agency, here's the form you fill out. When you go through the federal government, so that's something we can at least offer. But I think we know that you know, one of the things, you know, bullying, and people use the term bullying, and I think it is a broad term. One of the things we think is important to note is that some forms of bullying are civil rights violations. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, and that there are things that those kids.
What about our folks in the room here? Any questions or comments? Yeah,
I guess, my name's Lynn Bartelt, I'm from Fusion Academy, and I'm just, as a follow-up, do you have any youth action teams in Marin County around these?
So we, I will, yeah, and we do, Marin County has a lot of folks that are sort of connected through the broader network, and again, as you know, Marin is the first, I think, but in terms of youth programs, I don't know that we have anyone here, although we do have one of our the key advisors. We work with Black Youth Leadership Project, which is out of Sacramento, but works with kids across the state. We work with API Youth Rising, which is based here in Northern California. They are the organization that was started by a junior high student or a middle school student, so and are still doing extraordinary work. And so there are opportunities through those two organizations, but we are doing, one of the things we are also looking at is sort of doing more work to share like a civil rights 101 with young people so they know what their rights are. And so if you're interested, or if you have students who are interested, I'd be happy to talk to you about sort of how we can actually lift them into some of the work. That'd be great. Yeah.
I love that idea.
And I think, and there's,
That's where,
yeah,
for me, that's where it can really make.
yeah, I think that's for sure. And I think,
Nancy and I are writing.
yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I think, no, we were, and Mark, you'll remember, like, on some of our calls with civil rights leaders, API Youth Rising has been very outspoken. This form won't work for this reason, which is great. Like, you know, that's what we need to hear, like, you know. And it's so funny because sometimes they will couch it and say, well, like, young people don't want to go through that many questions. And I'll be like, you know what? Neither do old people. So this is a good point. We need to think about how we can address this. But I think there are opportunities there. So I would love to.
Yeah, and not in our town, if you have not
Yes.
looked at them, they have tons of resources, and we're really trying to get them. We had three different cities at different points, and one city carried it the longest, but Marin is so small to try and have all these little cities. We really feel it should be a county-driven effort. And so we're really trying to work towards getting a not in our town Marin, and having youth help us get there would be huge.
There's actually, they have Not in Our Town has Not in Our Campus, and they have some schools specifically.
Ton of resources, so we can hook you up.
Yeah, that'd be great, and, congrats on.
Oh, thank you, thanks.
Awesome.
Excellent. What about our folks on the Zoom? Any feedback, questions that you may have for Becky? Feel free to use the chat as well. Okay. All right, well, I got another one for you then, Becky. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the numbers are revealing so far. I know you all are just getting started, but I know that I've heard of so many more incidents happening as of late, and just curious, how are the numbers trending? If there are particular pockets of California that you've noticed increases, what are you finding so far?
So these are all important questions. So let me start with a few things. We've kind of had our official launch in May. So if you're looking at just 6-month data, we've received over 1,000 reports and calls, but not all of those were actually reports of hate. What I want to say is if people call and it doesn't involve discrimination, we still try and help them. It's like a landlord-tenant issue that's unrelated, we'll connect there. In terms of reports of hate, we've had about 513 over a 6-month period. One of the things we have noticed in terms of trends is the first month, we had about 40% of the state, 40% of counties in the state reporting. Now we have 75% of counties, so we are doing a better job of reaching more people. In terms of very recent trends, the month of October, we did see almost a doubling of reports, so that is a significant increase. And I think that is consistent with what we've seen historically whenever there is, there's conflict in the Middle East, we see an increase in anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry and anti-Arab bigotry. And I emphasize that because we want to make clear that we are aware that all of these can in fact be separate. So it may be connected to that. It also may be we did a bigger push in terms of our digital ads to reach more people. So it's hard to sort of say exactly the source of that sharp increase, but there's no question that we are, our just like communities across the country and across the world, our communities are right now. So we're definitely seeing that. Yeah.
I'm just curious, this being Trans Awareness Week, are you
Yes.
partnering with organizations?
Yes, thank you for asking. Actually, it was really beautiful this morning. Berkeley has Transgender Awareness Month. So Transgender Day of Remembrance is coming up, but they've announced this whole month. So I was there, but they had a flag raising in Berkeley, which was great to sort of recognize both the entire month. And I also think, a couple of things. So yes, the Trans Latina, which is based in LA, but serves actually across the country, is one of our key partners. Bambi Salcedo, who's the head of Trans Latina, is also the vice chair of the Commission on State of Hate. So we're lucky to have that kind of expertise within our offices. So we work a lot also with Equality California, as well as with another one of our partners who joins our weekly care coordination calls is the LA LGBT Center. And so we actually just on Thursday last week had a really powerful Commission on State of Hate meeting, and it was concluded by a young trans man who spoke about sort of his experience. He had been unhoused, and then he was at the LA LGBT Center, and he actually closed it out with a song that he wrote to describe his experience. So we do, and the reason we do is it's the right thing to do because we serve all Californians, and unfortunately, we know there are a disproportionate number of hate crimes targeting gender Californians and transgender across our country. So it is very important that we make sure that we're highlighting that, and in particular, we recognize that people who live at the intersection of different forms of discrimination, transgender people of color in particular, are at significant risk. So we absolutely do. We are also very aware in working with people to sort of think about how do we support young people right now, as there's been a slew of anti-trans legislation nationwide, efforts in local school districts, and really making sure that students are safe.
Well, maybe just one more question for you, and then I want to make sure we leave time to highlight for people these other upcoming events that are happening, United Against Hate events happening. So, this perhaps is a less sexy question, but I think it pivots off of what Sam was asking a moment ago around coordination with the county and the school district. And so for this effort, which is statewide, I wonder if you could just share some insights and wisdom that you have around how you all have been able to coordinate. You mentioned someone may call about a tenant landlord issue. It's like, that's not my area, but I'm going to direct you. There seems to be kind of a no wrong door approach to everything. And I just wonder if you could share how you've been able to assemble that behind that door, and what's that taking to do to align and integrate across all of these different services and supports that the state provides.
I think I love, yes, that is exactly what we talk about as no wrong door. And I think about it as somebody, I've been in the federal government, then I was in civil rights groups, now I'm back in government. And the reality is, if you are in pain and you're outside of government, you don't really care which office does it, you just care that someone does that. And so what we have done, we have really been intentional about behind behind the scenes, building those relationships and communication sort of protocols. So for example, I mentioned the California Department of Social Services. They have 180 local grantees now through their Stop the Hate program. We need to make sure, so we kind of embrace them in our network. They are all now part of our network. We meet, and again, this is not super exciting, but just to give you logistics, we have set up regular meetings at least once a month, and I cannot tell you the number of times we reach out and like, hey, did you have somebody who does this? Can you do this? So that's part of it. I mentioned the library, again, who thinks of the state library? The state library has these great ethnic media grants. They have been amazing partners. One of the things, if you go on our website, we have a library toolkit for libraries, for public libraries, if you want to think about how you can use your library to sort of help combat hate, with recommended actions you can take. And the state library was amazing in helping us to distribute that. Of course, the Department of Justice and the Office of the Attorney General, you know, they have been extraordinarily supportive of what we do and getting the word out about the offer. You know, I mentioned California Victim Compensation Board, and some of those relationships happened because we were asking people, what do you need? And we were like, it's not us, but we have an obligation to figure out who it is. So one of the things we do is we make those connections and we hold them tight and we keep staying in touch with them. We make sure we do that. People come in and out, but the agencies stay. So we kind of work on those pieces. And then in terms of the work with counties, like I said, y'all are great because you are much more proactive than a lot of counties, but we are trying to sort of, and I will be following up with you because we're looking at, you know, we work with community-based organizations, leaders, and other groups that have been sort of meeting with us regularly. We're now looking at setting up something similarly for counties that are proactive so that we can meet with you regularly and figure out what we can do better. So it does take some coordination behind the scenes that I think it's the least we should do as a government. And like I said, if you need help, you know, it doesn't really matter to me whether it's my jurisdiction or the Department of Education.
You said it really well. Well, everybody, let's give another round of applause. Here, I just wanted to give the floor to our colleagues in the room who have some other United Against Hate Week events coming up. You all want to speak to that, Nancy or Lori?
I'm gonna let Nancy do it because she did all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, Nancy.
Yeah, let's see, like tomorrow's Tuesday. And what do we have on Tuesday? Wednesday night is our feature film, Preparing the World, Stories from the Tree of Life. That will be held in the Mark Theater. Doors open at 5:30. You can find the event on Eventbrite. We will have the filmmaker Patrice O'Neill and the co-director of Not in Our Town present for a community discussion. Thursday, we have a film sponsored by San Anselmo Equity Committee. It's called Our America Lowball, and this is going to be shown at the Archie Williams High School. And I think that's 6:30 to 8:30. Friday, we have an event with the Asian American Alliance of Marin. That will be at the Marin Multicultural Center. Multicultural Center of Marin is the full address if you have to look it up, but it's on, I think, 701 Fifth Avenue in San Rafael. And that's a dinner. You do have to register before, so if you want, if you'd like to come, go to aamarin.org, and that'll be a panel discussion, and the name of the session is actually called Casualties of War, a New Exclusion Act. And it deals with people who have been traumatized in their own country, had to come to the US and then dropped into the system as children, and how there's intergenerational trauma and harm that passes on and continues with immigration. Then on Monday is the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and that'll be handled by the SPAR Center.
That's
just the highlight of a few.
Yes.
I know there's something in Tuesday, but I can't remember exactly.
One to mention that's youth connected is the Karma Club,
Right.
which is tomorrow before the film between 3 and 4 at Northgate Mall. And I'm familiar with the work behind the Karma Club, and it's Create Art Against Hate.
That's on Thursday,
for-
right?
For teens, for people in high school or younger.
Right. So the Tuesday event is Youth Transforming Justice, which is restorative justice for our local teens.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's really, so it's peer support, peer solutions.
Excellent. So everybody, we have this all available on the United Against Hate events page, and so we'll pop that in the chat in a moment, but please do check out the website for more details. We can share that with you after the meeting for our folks who are here. But let's go ahead and give just a final round of applause. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Great job. And I'm putting that.
It's so nice to meet you in person.
I love everything.
You too, like I said, I was, it's not a great question. No,
Yeah, I know.
I think.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank you so much.
Yes, I see you. Hi, I'm Judy Love. Amy, you're new as well, right?
Today.
Well, you're actually